August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb. Code name RDS-1. The Americans called it Joe 1. It ended the nuclear monopoly. It started the arms race. Over the next 40 years, 456 nuclear devices were detonated at this site, and the 500,000 people who lived downwind were never evacuated. Northeastern Kazakhstan. 1947. The Soviet atomic bomb program needed a test site. They chose a vast zone of steppe near the city of Semipalatinsk, approximately 18,000 square kilometers. According to Soviet planning documents, the area was deemed remote and sparsely populated. It wasn't empty. According to research by historian Togjan Kasanova in Atomic Steppe, tens of thousands of Kazakhs lived in villages scattered across the region. Pastoral communities, farmers, people who had been there for generations. They called it the Polygon. And unlike the closed cities we've covered, Ozersk, Arzamas 16, Krasnoyarsk 26, this wasn't a zato. The test site itself was restricted. Military control, guarded perimeter, but the surrounding communities, open territory. No walls, no special privileges, no protection, just the fallout. The first Soviet atomic bomb was designed at Arzamas 16. The plutonium core came from Mayak at Ozersk, but the test? That happened here. August 29, 1949, 7:00 a.m. local time. The device sat atop a tower, 29 meters high. It was a plutonium implosion design, nearly identical to the American Fat Man bomb dropped on Nagasaki. According to declassified Soviet records, espionage, particularly intelligence from Klaus Fuchs, had accelerated the program by an estimated 1 to 2 years. Yield, approximately 22 kilotons. The shockwave traveled for kilometers across the steppe. Test structures within a 5-kilometer radius were destroyed or heavily damaged, according to Soviet test documentation, and the fallout cloud drifted east. Here's the pattern that would repeat for 40 years. Detonate the bomb. Monitor the blast. Track the plume. According to atmospheric records preserved in Soviet archives, meteorological conditions were tracked before each test. Wind direction, speed, predicted dispersion patterns. But warnings to downwind populations? Inconsistent, often absent. In her research documented in Atomic Steppe, Togjan Kasanova describes how many villages received no advance notice of tests, no evacuation orders, no explanation for the tremors or the clouds they could see rising on the horizon. Some residents reported being told to stay indoors for a few hours. Others heard nothing at all. The early atmospheric tests released the most fallout: iodine-131, cesium-137, strontium-90, elements that accumulate in soil, water, livestock, milk, human bodies. Kazakh pastoral communities relied on livestock, sheep, cattle, milk, meat, all of it exposed. 456 detonations, 116 atmospheric tests. Until the Partial Test Ban Treaty in 1963, 340 underground tests. From 1963 to 1989. Underground tests were supposed to contain the radiation, but venting incidents, accidental releases, happened regularly, according to data compiled by the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. When underground tests failed to fully contain the blast, radioactive gases and particles escaped to the surface. The largest devices tested at Semipalatinsk were thermonuclear, hydrogen bombs. According to CTBTO records, some tests exceeded 1 megaton, more than 50 times the yield of Hiroshima. The contamination spread across a vast area. And here's what makes this worse. The people downwind weren't just ignored. According to research by medical anthropologist Magdalena Stokowski and others, they were studied. Soviet medical institutions, particularly the Institute of Biophysics, conducted radiation exposure studies on populations near Semipalatinsk. According to declassified records and research published in medical journals, thousands of residents were monitored. Blood tests, cancer screenings, birth defect documentation. The question researchers have raised: were some communities left in place deliberately? Based on documents reviewed by Stokowski and others, the Soviet government was aware of elevated radiation exposure levels in certain villages. Yet, evacuation decisions were inconsistent. Some villages were relocated. Others, despite documented contamination, remained inhabited for years. The legacy of these studies is disputed. Some researchers argue the monitoring was purely for public health assessment after unintended exposure. Others point to patterns suggesting deliberate observation of radiation effects on human populations. What is verified? The studies happened. The data was classified. The villagers were rarely told the results. Here's what we can verify. The test history is documented by the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. 456 tests. Dates, yields, locations, all recorded. The medical monitoring programs are documented in Soviet-era scientific literature and declassified health ministry reports. Togjan Kasanova's Atomic Steppe provides the most comprehensive English language account, based on Kazakh and Russian archives, interviews with survivors, and declassified documents. Magdalena Stokowski's anthropological research documents the lived experience and intergenerational health impacts through fieldwork in affected communities. The test site itself is visible from space. Craters, bunkers, roads leading to ground zero. This is not rumor. This happened. February 28, 1989. A Kazakh poet named Oljas Suleymanov went on live television. He read a statement calling for the closure of the Semipalatinsk Test Site. Within hours, according to accounts documented by Kasanova, thousands of people gathered in Almaty. Protests erupted across Kazakhstan. The movement was called Nevada Semipalatinsk. The name was deliberate. It linked the Polygon to the Nevada Test Site in the United States. Both superpowers, both testing on marginalized populations. This was unprecedented in Soviet Kazakhstan. Public dissent, mass organization, demands for transparency. The movement grew to hundreds of thousands of members, according to contemporary reports. And it worked. August 29, 1991. Exactly 42 years after the first test, Kazakhstan's president, Nursultan Nazarbayev, ordered the Semipalatinsk Test Site permanently closed. This was 3 months before Kazakhstan formally declared independence from the Soviet Union. Closing the Polygon became one of the founding acts of the independent Kazakh state. It was a symbolic break, a rejection of Moscow's control, a reclaiming of sovereignty over Kazakh land. But the damage had already been done. The health legacy is still being counted. According to studies published in medical journals and compiled by the Kazakh government, communities near the test site report elevated rates of cancer, birth defects, and cardiovascular disease. Some studies estimate that hundreds of thousands of people were exposed to radiation at levels sufficient to increase health risks, though exact casualty figures remain debated due to incomplete records and methodological challenges. The effects are intergenerational. According to research by Stokowski and others, elevated rates of genetic damage have been documented in second and third generation descendants of exposed populations. The scientific debate continues. Long-term low-dose radiation effects are difficult to isolate from other health factors. Soviet-era records are incomplete. control populations are hard to define. But the communities downwind know their history. Semipalatinsk was not unique. Every nuclear power tested on someone's land, often on colonized or marginalized populations. But Semipalatinsk is unique in this. The people who lived downwind organized, protested, won. They didn't stop the bombs in time to save themselves, but they stopped them. Subscribe for real history that was designed to stay invisible. Next time, Seversk, codenamed Tomsk 7, the largest nuclear production zato in the Soviet Union. A city of 100,000 that didn't exist on any map. And in 1993, an explosion that sent a radioactive cloud across Siberia. Tell me in the comments. Did you know about the Nevada Semipalatinsk movement? One of the most successful anti-nuclear protests in history. And it happened in Soviet Kazakhstan.